Hi you guys, happy Tuesday. I was just thinking while I was driving about a conversation I had with a friend, and we were discussing Acts chapter 16. And what's interesting about Acts chapter 16, this is the portion of scripture where Paul and Silas are walking down the road and they're being followed by a young girl. And this is a young girl who has an ability to see the future. She makes money for her masters doing this, and so but she's following them, and she's saying about them, you know, these men worship the most high God, and they're telling you the way to be saved. And so she continues to follow them, declaring this, and it's true, it's truth. But at some point Paul turns around and he casts the demon out of her. He casts out an evil spirit. And I just found the passage so interesting because a couple things. One is that, you know, I hear a lot about spiritual experiences. I've heard people describe maybe drugs and their interaction with drugs to be spiritual. I've heard people describe sexual encounters as spiritual. I've heard people describe emotional connections with people as spiritual, or even things, behaviors such as going to get your future read, and just a lot of things that we call spiritual. And I'd say perhaps, yes, they are spiritual in nature because they come from a spirit, but it's important to understand that every spirit is not from the Spirit of God. And so just because it's spiritual does not mean that it is godly. It doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that it's safe. It doesn't mean that it is advisable. It doesn't mean that it's holy. And so I would just encourage you, scripture says to test the spirits, to try them, and to see of what spirit it comes from. And we can know, we're told that you can know something by its fruit, right? So you can look at the outworkings of something and you can know it. And so the fruit of the Spirit of God is love and joy and peace and patience and kindness and gentleness and self-control. And if it's not bearing those things, if it's not coming from that place, then it's not of the Spirit of God. And so I would encourage you just to consider that. Second thing I thought that was very interesting about this passage is that everything that she said was true. She was declaring it. And in fact, it seemed to be something that was, might even be a positive thing to say. And it's really important just that we realize that just because it's true doesn't mean that that we're operating in the Spirit of God. And there's a lot of things that I see and hear being said that are true, but they're not coming from the Spirit of God because they're not producing this certain fruit, right? And it's very important that you test the Spirit. Just because you feel passionate, just because you feel fervor, just because you feel deeply connected to something does not mean that you're operating in the Spirit of God. So I encourage you to test the spirits. And just because somebody else is saying something that sounds true doesn't mean that it's of the Spirit of God. Truth is not the fruit of the Spirit. Now, only God's Spirit can reveal truth, right? Truth belongs to Him. He is the source of it. But we can speak truth, and if we speak it without love, if we speak it, we can be operating from an evil spirit, just like this girl was. And so I would encourage you to consider the place that you're coming from. What is it producing? And for what purpose are you saying it? Are you just vigilant? Are you offended? I keep thinking about this verse that says, great peace have they which love thy law, and nothing shall offend them. And, when we love God's law, there are so many offensive things out there, but it's about the spirit in which we receive them, that we don't internalize that offense because we love His word, because we love His wisdom, because we understand it. We have His perspective, so we don't have to become attached to or consumed with or emotionally caught up in something other than Him and His perspective and His ways. And so if you find yourself needing to be argumentative, if you find yourself needing to be aggressive, if you find yourself feeling just self-pitying and victimized and just offended, whatever offense looks like to you, then I would encourage you to test the Spirit, because what you're saying might be true. It may be very valid, but is it of the Lord?